It's Happy Times and Places, a Doctor Who podcast where moaning is verboten. We are simply accentuating the positive of a chosen story, and I, Toby Haydock, have to guess what my guests' favourite things about their chosen story are.
Hi Toby, this is Laurence Clark. I'm a stand-up comedian, writer, screenwriter and playwright. And the story that I picked for your podcast is Terminus. So why pick Terminus? Well, whenever you listen to people talk about the story who worked on it, they always mention the really frantic studio recording and the fact they ran out of time. And I think that's partly because of me, because on the first day of recording, Monday the 11th of October 1982, I, as an 8-year-old kid, went to watch Doctor Who being recorded, which, as you can appreciate at the time, was the most amazing thing that has ever happened to me. It came about because Peter Davison was recording a sitcom called Sink or Swim in Whitley Bay in the northeast, which is where I grew up. And my mum tried everything to get him to come to our house. She rang to fix it, probably a lucky escape. Although I did, as you know, end up with that some years later. But he eventually did come. He came, pulled up to our house in his Audi and spent a couple of hours talking to me and invited me to come and watch a recording. And went away and we thought, oh, that's never going to happen. And then the production office wrote to us and invited me to watch the first day of recording on Terminus. And when it was recording, I was up in the viewing gallery in the little room next door to where the producer and the vision mixer and the director sat. And in between takes, Peter Davison would run up and see if I was okay and talk to me, which probably didn't help the production schedule. But I have vivid memories of watching those first few scenes. The scenes where Mark Strickland holds the cube talking to the Black Guardian, and the cube was hot and kept burning his hands. I remember he kept dropping it. And there's a scene with Tegan and the Doctor, a very short scene where they're running up a corridor, and that was recorded over and over and over again. So that's why I picked Terminus. Years later, when I was on a BBC acting course, I was at one of those drinks receptions that they always have, and I got talking to Janet Fielding, and managed a whole conversation, not talking about Doctor Who until right at the end when I said thank you Tegan, and she then went ballistic and started shouting geek at me in front of the whole room, which probably didn't help my acting career. So let's crack on then with my favourite positive and possible things for Terminus.
Oh, well, what a lovely introduction from my friend Laurence Clark, a fine stand-up comic. So I would urge you to go and check out his work if you've not come across him before. And yes, he is one of us. So I'm very glad that he's taking part in this. And I don't know about you, but I'm very jealous of Laurence. He said visiting the set of Doctor Who was up to that point the most exciting part of his life. I think if I'd visited the set of Doctor Who as a kid, it would still be the most exciting thing of my life. And he's tempered that by choosing Terminus, which is a story not a lot of people eulogize. And the very raison d'etre of this podcast is to accentuate the positive, which I'm now going to try to do with part 1 of Terminus, which I'm not going to say is going to come particularly easy for me for reasons that I will explain, and I am not a Terminus knocker. But let's get into it. I'm on episode selection on the DVD, and so I'm going to press select, you press play or whatever it is you want to do, in 3, 2, 1. And we're going to enter part 1 of Terminus. Now, this is an episode I haven't seen an awful lot. Terminus was one of the very last videos I got, bootleg stories I got, because I missed all of this season, apart from Arc of Infinity, because I was away at school. I was sent away to boarding school, not because we had money. In fact, the opposite. My dad had gone when I was 4, and he was a medical man, and so a charity for bereaved doctors' families. We weren't actually bereaved, but they bent the rules. We were abandoned. Offered to send the youngest of Mum's kids away to a local boarding school, but nonetheless one that I had to stay at, apart from Saturday nights. And which meant the unthinkable happened. I missed Doctor Who, and nobody I knew had a video recorder, so I missed this season. My friend Ollie had to come in and explain to me. He largely told me the cliffhangers and the comings and goings of companions and who died, basically. But half term coincided with part 3 of Terminus, so that was the one that I sort of had a bit of experience of. So then when it came to collecting stuff and finding out about the stories, it was bottom of my list, because at least I'd have a flavour of it, whereas I'd not seen, Snake Dance or Mordrin or Enlightenment or King's Demons. And then when I did get this, why are you not talking about what's going on screen, Toby? Because it's Turlough being furtive in a corridor, which he is for ages in this story, and arguing with Tegan, which he does for ages in this story. I love Mark Strickson, by the way. That's definitely going to be a positive. And the idea of the companion trying to murder the Doctor, I think, is a great twist on what we tend to have of a companion figure, and I think is one of the good ideas of the show. Peter Davison sometimes, I know, has knocked it in interviews, said, oh well, it meant you had to keep him apart, but that's okay. The Doctor and companion split up quite a lot anyway. I don't think it's the fact that Turlough wants to murder the Doctor that means Turlough and Tegan are stuck in air ducts for the majority of this story. I think it's just that there's not quite enough story to go around, but we will see. But even when I got this on video, it was in the days where you had an E180 videotape, which annoyingly fits, apart from season 18 and the Mind Robber, because they have short episodes, it fits a traditional 7 episodes of Doctor Who, so you couldn't quite get 2 4-parters on. So thank goodness for the McCoy era when that came along, although season 24 was annoying because the 2 4-parters came first, so you had to have something out of order. However, for a reason lost in the mists of time now, I think I had Mordrin Undead and Terminus 2 to 4 on an E180. One had got lost in the Malay, and I assume it's from whoever I'd got it from, because I was dependent on, drive-by Doctor Who drop-offs. There was a very furtive exchange thing going on. I wasn't part of fandom, so initially, I was by this point. I'd got friends in Wolverhampton who were fans. Anyway, So I don't know this episode very well. Fast forward to Doctor Who coming back, and the week before the broadcast of Rose, I was killing time. And I thought, well, there's a few Doctor Who's I'd seen Classic Who over and over and over again. And I thought, well, what are the stories? This is the last time I'm going to watch Classic Who for ages, because there's new stuff to have, which is great, and I'll eventually, be in the mood to watch. I felt like I'd sort of done it all pretty much. I knew it all like the back of my hand, so it was great because I knew that I could have a bit of time off watching the new series, and then hopefully my intrigue about the classic series would come back. But there were stories I knew less well, and this was one of them. So this was the story I chose to watch to kill time before Rose was broadcast. Was it the night before? It was certainly in the week of Rose. It wasn't on the day, because on the day I watched the Armageddon Factor, and I got halfway through part 2. And then my friend John came round, and we watched Enemy of the World 3 and The Space Pirates 2, because he'd not seen the orphaned episodes. And that was all that existed of Enemy of the World at the time. And again, I'm not massively referring to what's going on screen, because I've sort of have thought about this, because I consider this quite a tricky installment to cover, because it's quite a lengthy opening. I mean, I think these days you just have it with a couple of furtive looks to show the character relationships between Tegan not trusting Turlough being up to no good. I mean, seeing as the TARDIS is infinite, it seems a bit mean to give him Adric's room. Also, we've spent more time with Turlough being furtive in the TARDIS and Tegan being a bit sulky about it than we did getting over Adric's death. I mean, it's interesting how the show often doesn't spend time on the regulars doing their thing in the TARDIS, and rightly so. I think you want to be in the setting of the new adventure. And I think Andrew Cartmel was right when he really when he came in later and minimised the TARDIS scenes, because my overriding image of a lot of these episodes is quite a lot of wandering around the TARDIS corridors and then landing on a spaceship and wandering around the corridors of that. But the Black Guardian being in Doctor Who was a really exciting idea for younger me, because I'd not seen the Guardians and I couldn't quite imagine them. And I thought I'd seen a clip at the end of Legopolis, but it was very unclear because it was in the negative, it was that bit from the Armageddon Factor. So I still couldn't quite make out. There was something rather sort of ephemeral and difficult to picture about the Guardians until I saw a picture in Doctor Who magazine when Valentine Dial died of the Guardian of the Black Guardian with the crow on his head. And I actually, as a young person, thought the idea of the Black Guardian having a black bird on his head and the White Guardian having a white one on his head were rather nifty ideas. Now I am not so sure, and yet being somebody of the target age, I liked the symbolism of that. I thought that was sort of apt, and it set them up as these kind of, he's not going to hang around a youth club or a bar or wander around W.H. Smith's with a dead rook on his head, dead crow on his head. But can he be an arch manipulator of the dark forces of the universe and look like that? Why not? That could be a manifestation of what they look like to us, because that's all that our ocular nerve can kind of manifest for such huge beings of hugeness. They're the Black Guardian, the White Guardian. They're about as big as it gets. And obviously the reality is it's they're represented by two ancient character actors sitting down and yelling. Well, in one case yelling and not in the other case being quite plaintive. But I certainly like the idea of grappling with forces that huge. Valentine Dial has a marvelous voice, so I'll give it that. But I have to say, when I watched this episode, and that's the last time I watched this episode, gosh, was the lead into Rose, that week leading into Rose. So that's 15 years ago. I texted my friend Johnny Camden and said, I'm watching part 1 of Terminus. I think it's the worst episode of Doctor Who I've ever seen. Because I don't know, it seemed to me to encapsulate, and I really like the Davison era. I really like Peter Davison. I really like Mark Strickson. At the time, I was absolutely in love with Nyssa. That's not to say I'm not now, but I was really in love with her then. She was definitely my favourite companion, and I think Janet Fielding is brilliant as Tegan. But often the material they get wandering around the TARDIS is pretty thin, and in this case takes quite a long time. I like that design of the skull. I think that's a great image, and that's very intriguing. And I don't really know what's going on, but this you know, the episode seems to be picking up and adding some strange sort of jeopardy, and I have to sort of leap back in time a little bit and go, I've always defended this story against its sort of bad reputation, because I really like Stephen Gallagher, who I think's he's a proper sci-fi writer, and I think very happily and skillfully put proper sci-fi ideas into Doctor Who, which often is not hugely sci-fi. It's got, it's an adventure story where sometimes the British and the Nazis, or the cowboys and the Indians, or the baleful forces and the heroes, just happen to have silver hats and green skin, but actually some of the more sci-fi Doctor Who turns me off a little bit, because I'm not particularly scientific. It wasn't a subject I was great at school, and I'll sometimes sort of nod along when Doctor Who wrestles with scientific concepts, when Christopher Bidmead comes in and goes, I'm being very, very clever, and I'm like, yeah, can somebody invade Earth though, rather than talk about maths? And that's certainly how I felt as a kid. I wanted autons making plastic things kill people, not wandering around inside the TARDIS in a loop. And I love season 18 now, but I as I say, as a kid, the Doctor Who I wanted involved a bit less wandering around corridors. This Black Guardian trilogy is quite interesting because it's sort of set on 3 different spaceships, Mordrin, Terminus, and Enlightenment, with people walking up and down various corridors, sometimes arguing. And the corridors, to be fair, are different. They're quite Art Deco, aren't they, in Mordrin Undead? These corridors are sort of grey and sad. And the ones in Enlightenment are opulent and strange, and a sort of accurate rendition, but with added strange atmosphere of Earth history. But there's still a lot of there is still a lot of action that pretty much is people not running through corridors, but walking up and down them. I do like Mark Strickson is so good at being shifty, and that crystal effect is simple but nifty. You don't have a voice like that without smoking a pipe. I don't think he did smoke a pipe, Valentine Dial. He was the man in black on the radio and the Black Guardian. If you want to see him being good, he's very nice, good as in decent, kindly. He's excellent as Dr. Keldermans in Secret Army, an underrated series that is on BritBox, which I don't have because I've got most of what's on BritBox on DVD. I don't quite... I'm trying to remember the details of this. I don't quite know why the door keeps disappearing and changing its design, but maybe that will become apparent. I have to say there are quite a few things in stories, and I watch these stories over and over. As I say, I could only watch episodes 2 to 4 of this over and over, and because I got it quite late when I got it, I watched it a lot, and I used to sort of think, if only I had episode 1, I'd be able to fit some of the pieces I'm missing together. And then I finally watched episode 1 and went, actually, episode 1 doesn't really tell us anything that's useful to the subsequent 3 episodes. It's just the stuff I don't understand. I don't really understand. And I remember my friend coming. I was worried Nyssa was going to leave. I had a feeling. I didn't have the magazines or anything, so I had no insight. But I was counting down the days, especially when Turlo came. Go, well, if they get one new companion, they might get rid of an old one. And I had a feeling that Nyssa would go, and I was very sad about that because she was definitely my favourite when I was born in 74, so I'd have been younger than I thought. So when she joined, I'd have said I would have been 10 or 11, but I wasn't. I was much younger. The Doctor comes into this episode quite late, doesn't he? Presumably because he's spent the early part of the day talking to Laurence. I'm thrilled that Laurence got to visit the set of Doctor Who. Good for him. And I think that would make. I mean, this was a story that had a slight, I had a slight special bond with because I'd actually seen an episode of it from that season. That's tragic, isn't it? That was the one thing, and it was also because Doctor Who had been on a Saturday, which was the one day I went home, and pretty much when I started having to sleep over at a school, the BBC moved it to the middle of the week. It's almost like it's all about me, and not only about me but against me as well. That was my worldview, which sometimes still is, and it's one I've got to be careful of. Go, the universe centers around me and is there to spite me. That's quite a nice, slightly aerial shot from director Mary Ridge on her only Doctor Who. She did some Blake 7. She did the Blake 7 Terminal, didn't she? So she did Terminal, Terminus. That's a thing you don't get in, or that I think about as a sort of Doctor Who thing that actually isn't a Doctor Who thing as much. Is a sort of not great android that sort of hangs around just to be there for a bit. Although, the android, the robotic colony in space has a plot purpose, as does the one in Sontaran Experiment. But they're a small and not very illustrious bunch. The sort of the silent service robots that provide a bit of jeopardy, but because probably would have taken quite a lot of effort to make. I like the pirates. You don't see them again, really. Space helmets. I think they're rather fun. I never think white quite works. These costumes are nice, actually, and I love the hair. I love Lisa Goddard's hair in this. I think she looks really funky, and Lisa Goddard is really interesting casting because she was a well-known television face. Often, we saw her, she was sort of posh and funny. So seeing her being a bit sort of tough and space piratey, which she does well, is another of those examples of John Nathan Turner, doing a bit of star casting, but I'm going to give them something that they'll have fun doing, something slightly different. Nobody really talks about Lisa Goddard in this. Married to Colin Baker at one point, but I think she's rather good, and I like Dominic Guard's ponytail. Dominic Guard has had he's a child psychologist now, isn't he? But he had a good career as an actor. He's got very boyish looks, so he played often sort of shifty youths. His brother, of course, Christopher Guard, is bellboy in Greatest Show in the Galaxy. They are quite a showbiz bunch because Philip Guard, their dad, is the person who sampled at the end of I Am the Walrus, the Beatles song. It was something they taped a bit of Shakespeare off the telly. Is he doing Edgar from King Lear? And it's Philip Guard, who was also Philip Guard was in Robin Hood with Patrick Troughton, and that surviving clip of Robin Hood that we have that's on the Power of the Daleks DVD has Philip Guard in it, and Philip Guard has seen it, I hope, because I sent it to Christopher. So reunited with his past. But Dominic Guard is married to Sharon Juice, who is Control in Ghostlight, and Christopher Guard was married to Leslie Dunlop, who is Norna in Frontios and Susan Q in the Happiness Patrol. They're not married anymore. He's now married to Duffy from Casualty. So it's if only she'd been in Doctor Who, we could have had a sort of extended family thing going on. But I have to admit to being slightly perplexed by Dominic Guard in this, because he's a good actor. He looks right. He's in The Go-Between, the Joseph Losey film. He plays the young Michael Redgrave and got plaudits for that. And he's in a film that I remember from my youth called Absolution with Richard Burton and Billy Connolly and an illustrious supporting cast and Di Bradley from Kes. And he's really good in that. And I don't quite understand why, despite his best efforts, I seem to recall struggling with him, because I think the ending of episode 1 is brilliant on paper and would be my automatic choice for being the thing I like most about the episode. But I seem to recall, I mean, it was 15 years ago last time I watched it, going, now we know, don't we? Now we know what it's all. And you go, what are you doing? Why are you doing it like that? Come on, give it a bit. It's one of those weird bits of acting that's sort of over the OTT and flat at the same time, which is a skill, but I'm not sure it's one that anybody should have. And as I say, it's intriguing, isn't it, how good actors can sometimes, for some reason, the elemental forces work against them. And it's a shame, because I think he looks good. I was dissing white costumes before. I actually quite like these white costumes, but I usually take a step back from them. I'm not a great fan of the ones in Ark in Space or the ones that the scientists have in Genesis of the Daleks. I don't know why I don't respond. I think I prefer dark and rusty to clinical and white. Although this is quite a dark and rusty story, and nobody loves it. Now I like that. Now you see, that's a simple trick, isn't it? Bandaged, bloody hands, slightly gnarled, bit of mucky makeup on, and it's just the human hand, but wrapping itself around your companion is a startling, alarming image, and the silence. And it's just a few extras with a few rags on, but I think that's really effective. That's nice jeopardy. He's got a lovely shifty quality, Mark Strickson. I think he's brilliant as Turlo. Do like that skull. I don't know why that door does that. Am I being thick? I don't know. And I really like Stephen Gallagher. I love Warrior's Gate. So as I say, I've always sort of, because people used to slag off Terminus something rotten. I go, no, it's doing something interesting. I do sort of admire Doctor Who when it goes, we're going to do something that isn't an invasion. We're going to do something that plays with a few ideas, and it's created its own setup with the veneer and what it is that they're up to, and it's a story about a company being too lazy to cure ill people, which is I think a really interesting setup for a Doctor Who story that then somehow ends up being about the Big Bang as well. Now, I think Martin Muncaster here is credited as Tannoy Voice, and I know that Tannoy complained because they are the company. A Tannoy is a bit like Hoover. A Hoover is a vacuum cleaner. Hoover is the make. A speaker is a speaker. A Tannoy is a kind of speaker or communication. If I was Tannoy, I'd have just gone, thanks very much, you're advertising our product, and suggesting that Tannoy still exists far into the future. I suppose they could be saying, yeah, but you're also saying we would allow ourselves to be used on a plague ship where people aren't looked after properly. I think you're looking too far into it, Tannoy. I don't think they look that far into it. I think, odd to complain rather than go, yeah, cheers. But you can tell that that's just some git in an office, can't you, who's in charge of who's in charge of being petty. Petty department. Did you see Doctor Who last night? Yes, no, I didn't. What is it? Oh well, they mentioned us. Oh, did they? Sounds like a job for me. I shall write a letter of complaint forthwith. You meet those sorts of people. I've quite often, as a freelancer, when you meet people who work for companies whose sole job is just to be a bit obstructive and a bit of an arse, and you go, this is why I'm a freelancer, so I never have to meet people like you. You still do, of course. And then you have to remind yourself that they get a regular wage and a pension and will probably have a happy retirement while you'll still be scrabbling for attention, love, and indeed money. So it's a momentary victory until reality creeps in. Look at this. Film. Suddenly it gets gorgeous, and the entire film allocation is spent in the ventilation shafts. What's he doing? See? How is he doing this? Oh, is it? Yeah. How do I feel about that? I think that the last bit is better than that, and I was talking through it because I'd invented a man from the petty department of Office Phil. But I think it's the now we know, don't we? Now we know what it's all about. That just seems to me to be slightly underpowered and yet too much. It's a mystery wrapped in an enigma, presented in a not very good performance. But I like the names as well. Olvir is a good name. And he does have to say we're all going to die for quite a long time, doesn't he? Anyway, well, I mean, I sort of girded myself to fill that out a little bit. Apologies, everybody, with a little bit of my backstory, and a few things that were, unique to me about how I encountered Terminus. But I did feel I wasn't going to have an awful lot to say about certainly the first sort of 10 minutes in the TARDIS, apart from, the rather curious thing of going, we're in the biggest spaceship in the world. That friend of ours that we're still sad about, let's chuck all of his stuff in the bin to fit in this, to house this shifty character who's going to have absolutely no qualms about just going, yeah, I'm going to get rid of this. And then the fact that Tegan is just a bit sulky about it. No, it all sort of pays lip service to drama that I think you would do so differently these days. You'd have faith in your characters to go, well, Turlo will at least be slightly more aware that, something has happened here and that it's an emotional wrench. And Tegan will be slightly more than tutty about the fact that he's basically going to burn any memories they have of poor old Adric. But I'm here to accentuate the positive. I do like the look of the pirates. I love Lisa Goddard's hair. I think that's a nice piece of casting. I do like Mark Strickson as Turlo. I do like the whole setup of the story, is that it is daring to be something a little bit different, and it's a shame that the previous story or the next story involved lots of wandering around different kinds of spaceship, because they seem to be sort of stuck in that sort of rut for this period, which is a shame, because I think if you bunged it in the middle of another Doctor's era, I think you'd go, okay, this is a bit strange and nicely sort of dark. Does it manage to go beyond depressing to dark? Does it go beyond being a gloomy, drizzly day into being thunderstorms? Let's see, because we're getting some new characters in the next episode. But there's still stuff there. I'm intrigued by the setup. I like the fact that they had to take evasive action, and the TARDIS, the door with the skull, which I really like, appeared, and Nyssa had to go through it. I think that's on paper terrifying. It wasn't quite pulled off as terrifyingly as I suspect it was imagined. You go, oh, we're on a leper shipper. That's interesting. And how's it going to treat disease? And I was taught in RE about leper colonies. I remember. Well, let's talk about that in future episodes, because I'm sure I'm going to have things to say about that. But what I think Is it going to be the skull on the door? I do like that skull on the door materializing thing. And this having to go through the door. And I did like the very simple menace of the hands wrapping themselves around Tegan. Doctor Who doing a really simple thing. Bunch of extras, hands, peril, scary. That's an image. That's an image if you're a kid you take away with you. I'm going to go with the skull door, I think. I'm going to go... I'm intrigued by that. It's a nice design. And it brings us into the story. And it's something a bit different. And it's ominous. It's ominous. Or do I like the hands? Skull and door. Skull and door. I don't think he's going to choose either of those things. What has Laurence chosen about episode 1?
So, part 1, I think my favourite thing is Lisa Goddard's space helmet, because it looks like it's moulded around a hairdo. She's got this hairdo that comes out at the side, and if you look at the space helmet, it's like it's been vacuum formed around a hairdo, which is just amazing. I also love the fact that Tegan thinks a crowbar is called a pry bar. Some Australian thing could be, I don't know. I also the thing that Lisa spends all of her spare time synthesizing an enzyme for fun. Yeah, the hours just fly by in the TARDIS.
Yes, they do. I do. It is quite quaint, isn't it? The things that they have the companions doing in the TARDIS. I mean, on another day, I would have chosen Lisa Goddard's space helmet, but I thought that would have been damning it with faint praise. But I do seem to recall Nielsen's gun in Warriors of the Deep was one of the things that we chose, wasn't it? Okay, I'll accept that. And also, I'm quite excited because Laurence chose sort of 3 quite disparate things and didn't really tie them together. And I reckon if he does that with every episode, that increases my chances of me and him having the same thing. So maybe Terminus could be a winner for me. I don't know. Well, look, that was the difficult first episode because the plot kicks in a bit here from here on in. We meet some of the characters and I've seen these episodes a bit more, so I definitely did pad that out a bit with some sort of domestic stuff with just me, the regular cast member of this podcast, taking quite a long time to fill you in with a little bit of backstory, which is sort of appropriate, actually, considering what happened in the episode. So I'm reflecting what went on screen. But I think, now the story kicks in. Now we know, don't we? Now we know what it's all about. So hopefully there will be more fun to be had in the subsequent episodes of Terminus. Thank you for joining me and my good friend Laurence Clark. An excellent comic. Do check him out, if only to interrogate him about the day that he visited the set of Terminus. The lucky fella. Okay. Well, from a happy time and place of Laurence's childhood into hopefully a happy time and place for you listening to this, which is now about to come to an end. It's about to terminate. And I've done about 4 different exit lines there and then kept on talking. This is why I hate me. More even than I struggle with episode 1 of Terminus, which is now ending. Stop talking. Well, welcome everybody to the second instalment of Terminus, which, as you've heard, has been chosen by the comedian Laurence Clark, who was lucky enough to be loitering around on set and treated very well by the sounds of it by Doctor Who himself, Peter Davison. And so if you read the history of the story, is perhaps the only person to have emerged from the recording of Terminus with many happy memories. But let's see. It's always been a story I've kind of felt the need to stick up for, because people aren't terribly kind about it, and I think it's got some interesting things going on. Although anybody that heard part 1 of this instalment of Happy Times and Places might go, but Toby, you didn't have an awful lot that was nice to say about part 1. But part 1 it takes a while to get round to being about Terminus. That's why. But anyway, let's see how we do with part 2. When the plot arrives. So I'm paused between episodes 1 and 2 on my DVD, and I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. And I get a chance to... Oh, no, I'm not. So I am... I am... Now, I might forget to edit this because I don't listen to... So, I actually wasn't paused between parts 1 and 2. I am on episode selection, and I'm going to press enter on part 2 in 3, 2, 1. So I do get a chance to view again Dominic Guard's Now We Know, Don't We? Now We Know What It's All About, which I think is a lovely, script-wise, is a lovely end of episode, where you suddenly go, oh heck, so this is why this ship is sort of abandoned, and as I say, it brings with it a lot of imagery and fear, and sort of biblical fear, because when I did RE, there were stories of leper colonies, and lepers feature quite prominently, don't they, in sort of miraculous cures and things like that. So there's something sort of ancient about them and biblical, which always gives, a sense of grandeur, but also a sense of, when you're learning about it, you sort of go, oh, well, thank goodness we've wiped that out and don't have that anymore. So to suddenly have it in the future in space, that's a nice, that's a nice conglomeration of fears. Yeah, no, we don't. Yeah, but I do like the fact that you've got the Doctor and co sort of on the move while this is happening. It just gives a bit of energy and drive to it. But now they're sort of trapped against the wall. So it's the cliffhanger for the Doctor, even though it's Olvia doing the speaking. That's quite cleverly sort of told, in a sense, the visual grammar to still have the Doctor the focus of it. Although again, they're clambering from one small. It's not just corridors. There are a few staircases in this story as well. So okay, we've got the arrival of a new spaceship, and Terminus seems to be this sort of scaffolding in space, which is quite novel. Yeah, we like Lisa Goddard's hair. So yeah, I remember learning about lepers in RE, and there was this guy who'd been canonized. He became a saint, and it's a story that always stuck with me, where he was working to help a leper colony and treat people, and he accidentally poured boiling water on his foot, and when he didn't feel anything, he realized that, oh, I have it too. And that always stuck me, that moment of realization, where which I suspect he probably saw coming, but in that moment where you go, oh, okay, that's me, I'm going to die, and perfectly avoidably, because the reason he was in harm's way is because he's put himself there to help people. But of course, there's the idea that the diseased people are stigmatized. I know there was a little bit of controversy about that when this story went out. But I don't think there's a cruelty about it. I think, as I say, it's invoking, because there are still parts of the world where it's an issue. But I think, I see it more as invoking the biblical rather than reflecting anything that's going on in deprived parts of the world. So I don't think, I don't think it's being I don't think I could see why people with a special interest in wanting the awareness of the condition to be correct would object. I absolutely understand that, but I can also understand why they felt it was okay to have it in the story. And these film sequences look so good, don't they? It's just such a shame that they are this beautiful quality, gloriously lit. You can see the reflection of the grills against the wall. This high-end looking stuff is for stuff the story could really do without, which is essentially sidelining Tegan and Turlough in the middle 2 episodes. Oh, and you see that's, Nyssa has the disease. That's the moment, isn't it? That's the pouring the boiling water on the foot, but it's telling us, the viewer, oh no, and so, the companion in peril, how is she going to get out of this, especially as we soon learn that the way that the Lazar disease is cured is pretty hit and miss, and mostly miss. That's a nice image of Dominic Guard, hiding in the shadows, ashamed. I think that's very human, and I like it. Brilliant shot of a ladder and some feet. Yeah, this is worth the really expensive film stock and the attention to detail of the beautiful lighting. I'd always thought that Turlough sort of kept his school jacket on. I rather like this waistcoat that he's got on. I think the first thing you'd do, though, wouldn't you? You'd get rid of your tie. That's the costuming thing, isn't it? No, we have to know it's Turlough because he still dresses as a schoolboy. Whereas, of course, everybody who goes to school and wears a school uniform knows is the first thing you do when you get the opportunity. When you're wearing a school uniform, is to get out of your school uniform. But I suppose that's going, look, he's so alien, he even likes his school uniform. This is very sweet. And I love his boots. I think we get a good shot of them later. I seem to recall there's lots of shots of feet going down steps in this story. I don't know why. Oh, yes. What do you remember of Doctor Who? Oh, I remember the monsters coming out of the sea. Oh, I remember the alien with the one eye and the squiggly face. Oh, I remember hands coming out of the earth. I remember lots of shots of metal staircases with feet walking down them. And I like the backstory of they supposedly offer a cure. Yeah, so if nobody ever comes back, what I don't quite know what's going on. Do you send them there anyway, in the hope? That seems a bit. It seems a bit odd to get away with that level of customer service. Who are you? We're the people that cure the Lazars. How many have you cured? Precisely none. Well, we'll send you our Lazars anyway. I think. I mean, I'm not an expert on capitalist economies, but I think capitalism succeeds where there is a gap in the market, and somebody, some entrepreneur, dives in. And it wasn't the somebody hanging around the centre of the known universe that went, the only people, the people who've got the monopoly on Lazar cure, are currently not curing any Lazars. I mean, if we just cured 3, I think we'll offer a discount. We'll cure at least one of your 50 Lazars or your money back. That's still better than what's being offered at the moment. But this is me who not having seen this story for a while, so maybe I've missed something important. But I do seem to recall, because when I got, and again, the veneer costume on film looks absolutely fantastic, and the red of that cloak and the armour there, it's Arak, isn't it? Because he's got the red cloak on. Looks absolutely magnificent over that grill, and with the film camera underneath and capturing it on that, on that film stock. And for the rest of its time on screen, it's clattery and on videotape. And here is another actor, Martin Potter, who, a bit like Dominic Guard, was a beautiful young man. Martin Potter was in Satyricon, wasn't he? Had a couple of sort of moments in the spotlight. Well, he did a Robin Hood as well, didn't he? That George Galaccio did. But you expect those actors to sort of shine and be beautiful and then sort of retire, because they never again could recapture their beautiful youth. So they and Fellini no longer returned their calls or whatever, so they went and lived somewhere romantic and wrote poetry and somehow lived as these successful. These actors who have these brief flickering careers somehow manage to spend the rest of their lives being fine, whereas most of us, even if we're fairly regularly employed, still need another job in 3 weeks or we die of starvation. But Martin Potter sort of had that, but then is still around and has an agent enough to sort of be available to play a supporting part in a Doctor Who story. And you think that's a really curious hybrid of a career. Now, definitely gonna, and I don't know if it will be for this episode, but Peter Benson as Boar, I think is probably the best thing about the whole story. It's a wonderful idiosyncratic performance, and of course this is way before he became well known for playing Bernie Scripps in Heartbeat, but he was still a known actor. I think he's in the Henrys of the BBC Shakespeare, and he's in Blackadder, of course. A really interesting actor with a sort of slightly quizzical hauntedness about him. He's sort of slightly cadaverous and yet sort of benign. He's like a friendly corpse. Lovely actor. I once had lunch with him. I was doing a Shakespeare in the Park, and the actors were... this is a Eric Saywood script-edited story, so the character dynamics have to be people hating each other and rowing. So Valgard and Arak basically spend the whole thing yelling at each other. Valgard, of course, is played by Andrew Burt, who is wonderful in Blake Seven, The Harvest of Kairos, as whatever he's called... sexist garage mechanic man, whatever he is. He calls Servalan woman, doesn't he? And she kisses her roughly, and she goes, "That primitive thing you subjected me to, I'd like you to do it again, because I'm a lady and I'm a sexy space lady and I like being dominated by bits of rough." And that's what Andrew Burt was. He was also the first Jack Sugden in Emmerdale Farm. He then went away and was and went and played Gulliver in Gulliver's Travels. Did lots of BBC stuff. Had a very, very good career, Andrew Burt, and then latterly was sort of popping up in Alan Partridgey type things, but then became, I think, like Dominic Gard is a child psychologist. He became a psychologist in London. He emailed me out of the blue. He put something on my website when Rodney Bennett, the director of Mask of Mandragora and Ark in Space and Sontaran Experiment, died, because Rodney had directed Andrew in some stuff, and he said, and we had a little bit of a back and forth, and I said, it's nice because I know your work, but he I think he never wanted to be interviewed about his acting because he'd put it all behind him, which is odd because unlike a lot of people, he'd had quite a lot of relatively recent credits. Now, I didn't ask him for an interview because I'd already been told that he was reluctant to engage, but he said he looked forward to meeting me at Rodney's memorial service, which I never eventually made it to. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to meet you there. And he said, it'll be lovely to meet you one day. And I thought, that'd be good. So, maybe convene a meeting, and then, once somebody's realised that you're actually all right, you can then say, well, can you do one interview? And I was, I was on my sort of list of things to address at some point, and then Andrew Burt died. I was quite surprised. He passed away the same year that Peter Benson, Boar, passed away, and the same year that John Waller, the fight director of Terminus, passed away. It was 2 or 3 years ago now. It was a bad year for Terminus. The famous moment of Nyssa removing her dress, I'd read about this in Doctor Who magazine, and it was sort of talked of, and Sarah Sutton was asked about it in interviews, and the way it was reported at the time, you would think it was the filthiest thing imaginable. It is still quite an odd thing. I mean, I suppose she's removing her skirt because she's quite hot, I suppose, and she's got this petticoat thing underneath. It is quite an odd moment, but it was certainly talked about an awful lot. I don't have an awful lot to say about it. It's quite static, isn't it? And poor old Dominic Gar's just having to sort of stand there and slightly look away. While a very slow robot makes somebody in a petticoat amble away, crying at him plaintively. Yes, quite static. I do like the sort of makeup on the veneer. Martin Potter looks a bit like Dracula, doesn't he? He would have been a good Dracula, actually. He's got that sort of sort of haunted dead youth thing about him. I think Andrew Burt's a lovely actor anyway, a very nice, gruff actor that brings realism to everything he does. But everyone's a bit... It's a hard sell, though, isn't it? And this Tim Munro playing Sigurd is one of the bandits in Creature from the Pit. So his Doctor Who career straddles Creature from the Pit and Terminus. Still about. He was an episode of Casualty or Holby City, directed by Steve Hughes, who directed the one in the department store with James Corden. That's Closing Time. And I remember saying, Steve, you cast Tim Munro, he was in some Doctor Who's, because I met Steve Hughes at a convention. I mean, I sort of like the dour thing about, this is downbeat and a bit depressing. I can see what they're going for, but it's quite a hard sell for the drama in something that's already set in a grey spaceship, where there's lots of people who are ill. And then the people who are looking after the ill people are all a bit miserable and hate each other. The people who live in the TARDIS are suspicious of each other and hate each other. Dominic Guard's a space pirate who's really sad. So you're sort of aching to get Peter Davison and Lisa Goddard back into it. And the strange man with the moustache, Peter Benson, who's not in this episode again, I think. Oh, and of course, they live... Are they addicted to this drug? Is that what it is? Or it's the thing it's the bittersweet taste of life. Thanks. It's also the lighting equipment from the planet Frontios. It's basically somebody invented some luminous gel, and people who made science fiction for the BBC went, well, that looks quite futuristic, even though you can now get it in shops. That's a hard thing to ask an actor to do. Yes, Andrew, what you have to do is you have to completely drop your guard and look really closely at that thumb, and she's then going to slightly shove you. And your armour is going to clatter because it's actually made of plastic. But I can see what they're going for with the veneer costumes, which are a nice design, very sort of skeletal. Again, if this was sort of all on film and shadowy, it would be ominous. I think we have a close-up of a wall here, don't we? Yeah. Let's not follow the lift down. Let's make the camera go up and look at closing on the wall. Oh, some stairs. Boot shot, boot porn. I love these boots. That's great. They are sexy boots. I like boots. I like wearing boots. I'm not tall or elegant enough to carry them off, but there's something empowering about having quite high boots. Although now at my age, I've been wearing compression socks to jog with, and getting those off is a production number. I wish I could sort of do it in stages. Well, I sort of do. I roll them down, and then I bend forward, then I point them around the ankle, and then I need a rest. So I know that boots may look kinky. Boots it's all very well being kinky, but actually the practicality of getting them on and off is no kinky matter. It's quite a laborious exercise that frankly leaves you too puffed out to be remotely kinky betwixt addition and removal. So I don't know what Boar's off to do. He said the reading's still climbing, so there's I have to confess I don't really know what happens in Terminus particularly. Well, I mean, I've probably seen it a good what's the average I've seen a Doctor Who story? What's the average you've seen a Doctor Who story? I would say I've seen this a good 10 to 15 times, which is probably it's amongst the least that I've seen a classic Doctor Who story. Certainly one of my least watched, but I would still say, that numbers probably between 8 and 12 maybe. The Garm. I rather like the Garm. The red eyes don't work. Somebody's gone, let's make it look alive, and we can't have eyes that open or close. We can't have practical eyes, so bung a couple of bulbs in because that makes it look alive. But it also makes it look a bit phony. But I think having a giant dog thing is okay, and he's quite sweet. Played by an R.J. Bell. I saw in he's in The Green Man, playing a sort of an American academic, and I think he was American or Canadian, the actor who plays the Garm. So poor old. That's because Nissa's cut her thumb, hasn't she? So she's dripping blood, which means that the Doctor and Kari have to follow her around the corridor. Yes, am I? And this is quite sort of intelligent plotting in the sense that it's this medical facility where, of course, you would sterilize the place before carrying out any procedures, so that adds to a little bit of jeopardy. The leper colony iconography is, but again, it's quite to add to the arguing Viking people, skeleton Viking tired vampire guards, and then you've got the sort of sack wearing ill people and the sad space pirate. You are, that's nicely lit there though, actually. But there are a lot of corridors and ventilation shafts in this period of Doctor Who. That's nice. I like a descending door that people have to sort of dive underneath, and that's a nice change in lighting state. There's not an awful lot of time spent. The Doctor hasn't actually had an awful lot to do, and you sort of think, Davison is a great strength of his era, and I wonder if there's not enough oomph in this episode so far, because actually Davison is very good at corridor acting, because he'll go the wrong way, or he'll give it a bit of thought before nearly heading in one direction and then heading in the other, or he'll give it a bit of speed as he leaves the scene and comes into it. And he's got that breathlessness, and he's worth his weight in gold. Actually, Peter Davison, but he's not been able to do much of that. I don't know if they've been told not to move too quickly, lest the set fall to bits. But I can, you can see the aesthetic that they're going for, which is grim and doom laden and sort of murky and sweaty and grimy and diseased, and that could, I think you could see this story being done now and really working and being especially you could tighten it up a bit, so it's not necessarily an ill thought out vibe to go for. I just think it's they aren't quite pulling it off. I'm supposed to be accentuating the positive. I don't mind it. As I say, I like the story idea. I think it's novel. I like all of the things that they're going for. I just wish they'd had a bit more success, maybe tying it all together. Because a lot of the ingredients are absolutely right. The veneer, as I say, look great. They look even better on film, which has a veneer. And they're all played by good actors. And I'm intrigued by this setup. What is the company doing? What's the story behind the curing of the Lazar disease, and this sort of setup that they have. Now I remember this, of course, because this is the first bit of this I saw, because it's the recap in episode 3, which I of course saw, which was so exciting. I loved Half Term. I feel I've been a bit hard on Terminus, whilst I think I needed to acknowledge it, early on. I enjoy this episode. I'm sucked into it. I find the dynamic interesting. I find the setup very interesting. I'm just trying to account maybe for why, nobody seems to truly love Terminus, and so I have to acknowledge that and sort of look for reasons. And I think I found quite a few. Remy Farazin is a fine and very accomplished film cameraman. These names: Alec Wheel and Scott Talbot, D. Robson, Joan Stribling. These are names I committed to memory as a youngster. Right, so I think, didn't Dick Coles do Underworld as well? Oh my God! So I think Tim Monroe's going, I was in Creature from the Pit and this. Dick Coles is going, it's nothing, mate. I had to design Underworld and this. So, what's my favourite thing about episode 2? Would it be wrong to say Olvia's boots? Would that be bad? I'm going to throw Peter Benson in there, but he's only in one scene in that episode, and he gets his great stuff to do later. But my worry is that Laurence will choose him now, which means that I can't choose him later. There's a lot of tactics in this, but I don't see how Laurence can choose Peter Benson and Bohr this early. I do like the look of Martin Potter as well. I do like the fact that he does look like he could be in a sort of 70s vampire film directed by an Italian, a 70s version of Dracula directed by an Italian film director who not only wanted his vampires to be beautiful, but he thought his Dracula was especially beautiful, and so he would film him in a bath. I've just created a whole film there. And I've always liked Andrew Burt as an actor. And I everyone hates his episode of Blake 7 as well, and I think it's glorious, and I think he's glorious in it. But Dominic Guard's boots. Am I going to be facetious? I did like that shot of the boots, and as I say, one of my main memories of this story is feet going down steps. I don't care. I'm gonna go. Laurence chose Lisa Goddard's helmet last week. I'm choosing Dominic Guard's boots. That's my favourite thing for episode 2. What's Laurence Clark's favourite thing for episode 2 of Terminus? And he might choose 3. And if one of those is the boots, I'm having the point.
So, part 2 then. And we're both going to get the same one, aren't we? Because the highlight of part 2 has to be Nyssa taking off her skirt for no apparent reason other than she feels a little bit hot. And then the Doctor readily recognises the plain grey skirt, which could be anyone's, but he instantly knows that's Nyssa's. I also love the fact that Nyssa handily wears an underskirt. The only other person I know that wears an underskirt is my mum, but then maybe I haven't been paying enough attention to what women wear under their skirts. Do people wear underskirts anymore? And also there's Sarah Sutton's amazing acting at being dragged off by the drone robot. You gotta love that.
I think they were called petticoats. People wore petticoats when I was younger. I'm from the Victorian times, but petticoats were a thing. I'm not sure if people wore them under miniskirts, which is what Nissa's wearing. But it's a good job she was, because you wouldn't have her wandering around in her pants. I suppose I should have thought to choose that, because it is a momentous moment. It's probably the most talked about thing about Terminus, and I did try to discuss it in the episode, but I'm slightly perplexed by it, because is it there? Because the way it's sort of discussed afterwards is like, oh, it's that moment. But you go, but they didn't go, we need a moment here where Nyssa takes her skirt off. So I suspect it probably just came a bit organically, did it? Where they went, oh, Nyssa takes off a piece of her clothing. But it just seems odd, which was the chicken and which was the egg. And the fact that it then gained so much traction afterwards. I just think it's a slightly bizarre and perplexing moment, and because it's not a sexy moment, is it? Because pretty much what she's wearing underneath is the same length and covers up the same amount of her as what she takes off. So I find that a bit odd if people go, oh crikey, she's removed a layer to show another layer that's a slightly different colour underneath. So I'm perplexed by the skirt removing moment. I suppose you had to be there, and by the time I got to see it, I'd already had it built up as this great big talking point, and I just saw it and went, oh, is that it? Oh, okay, well, okay, it's just the same as her taking a jacket off, really, just a bit lower down. But it is the most famous part of the episode. Somehow it's managed to overshadow Olvia's boots. But look, there's plenty in that. I think it's intriguing. I think it's original. I think its intent is good to do something different with the Doctor Who format. I think the forces are working against it, and so that makes me sort of side with it a little bit, because sometimes when you try and do something a little bit different, or try and stretch the format of Doctor Who, it really pays off, and sometimes things just don't work in your favour, but that's not necessarily your fault. And as I say, I'm a big fan of Stephen Gallagher, and I'm rooting for Mary Ridge. It's her only Doctor Who, and she's dead, I wanted to have slightly more of a legacy than we had to start shooting it live, which I think happens at some point, doesn't it, with Terminus? They pretty much did it as live before the lights went off at 10 o'clock, which probably was more frantic and had more pace than the story itself. Anyway, I'd still be entertained watching it of a Sunday afternoon, if I didn't have to talk through it, which I know takes a little bit away from it. I've certainly had pleasant times. As I say, I only really had parts 2 to 4. So I find part 1 a slightly undiscovered country and a little bit of an interesting curio, and I like the fact there are parts of Doctor Who that are still like that for me. So yeah, it's all right, Terminus. I'm rooting for you. I'm hoping it starts to come together for you, and that will hopefully happen in part 3, which was the episode I got to see at half term. So for a very long while, part 3 of this, alongside Arc of Infinity, were the only bits of season 20 I saw, which resulted in there being a great hole in the centre of my universe. But fortunately, I live in a happier time and place now, and I hope that these blatherings of mine find you in one too. Well, hello everybody. It's part 3 of Terminus, or for me, as a youngster, it's half term, so I get to see the only episode of Doctor Who, bar Arc of Infinity, which was on before the school term started, of this year. It seems unthinkable now, but we didn't have a video. We only had, at this stage, a black and white portable television. I know, I seem so young, and yet I'm from the old times. And yes, young people, not only did you have to actually watch television when the programme was on or you were in trouble, some of us watched programmes that were made in colour in black and white, because the black and white TVs, and indeed the licence for black and white TV, was much cheaper. I know I sound like I'm from good stock, don't I? But we were skint as a... we were as broke. We had a lower budget than Doctor Who, had a lower household budget than Doctor Who's. Well, in the case of Terminus's budget for metal armor. Well, look, enough of my. I were brought up in a shed with naught to eat and only black and white TV. Enough of that. Let us watch part 3 of Terminus. I'm going to press enter. I'm on the episode selection menu. So I'm going to press enter on part 3 in 3, 2, 1. And I'm a go. So, and I need to turn it has actually started, so don't be alarmed. I've just you can't hear it in the background because I had it on mute. There we go. Peter Davison's face has appeared with a Venetian blind effect. And here we are, the neon logo, Sid Sutton's title sequence. Oh, I was so excited to be back from school watching this. My friend Ollie had sort of told me, he didn't tell me everything that happened in the episodes really, he just basically told me what the cliffhangers were, because that's what I asked for, and if anyone died. So yeah, the first thing I saw was this, and I remember this. I remember watching this and thinking, this is the first I'd seen of Turlough, although I'd heard about this new guy. I've cheated a little bit. Well, I haven't cheated. I've watched the making of documentary on the DVD because my partner's not very well, so she'll occasionally fall asleep on the sofa, and I can't podcast next to what could be a corpse. But I really wanted to do this, so I watched the documentary by Brendan Shepherd, who I don't know, I've never met, and it's narrated by Floella Benjamin, and it's a really good piece. It's very much sort of nuts and bolts, but it explains the story. It's got Steve Gallagher on, who's very eloquent about what he wanted to do with the story. I do like Steve Gallagher. He's a nice bloke, and he's an intelligent writer who's ambitious with his sci-fi concepts. And it sort of talks about I think the really clever thing it does is because Mary Ridge, the director, is not there to defend herself. They have an advocate in the form of Fiona Cumming, another Doctor Who director, but who knew Mary Ridge, and so sort of sometimes postulates how she felt Mary would have thought under certain circumstances. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do when I think a lot of the failings of this in a sort of production history of it seem to be attributed to the fact that Mary Ridge had studio days and hours and things taken off her and suddenly had to improvise off the hoof, and this was done, with a curtailed schedule. So and I think that with the absence, without her to therefore advocate for herself, having Fiona Cumming there was good, and also good to see Scott Talbot and Alec Wheel, studio sound and senior cameraman, names you see on a lot of credits, interviewed. And Alec Wheel, I think, really should have been on more of the DVDs because he was such a key figure. Sadly died a couple of years ago. Anyway, so I'm immersed in Terminus, and I'm as I say, the only sort of issue I have with it is the sort of how static it is, and that does seem to be to do a lot with the staging. Because 42, for example, is set on a spaceship heading to disaster, but there's heat and there's the shaking and everyone's really sort of tense, and there's just sort of energy about it. That's Graham Harper, isn't it, directing? And I do think that Stephen Gallagher having the concepts of let's invoke the Big Bang and let's have these the veneer who are forced to do what they do, and let's and how we deal with something like a disease, especially during these times of COVID, but with the enemy being an illness, and I know it's not leprosy, but Lazar disease plays with the it very much invokes the idea, and it's leprosy in all but name, isn't it? And that's got that's got an historical basis for us, and it's something that we have an angle on because we can understand it, but it's not something you see particularly in Doctor Who. I always think she sounds slightly brummy. I don't know much about Rachel Weaver, who plays Inga, but she sort of goes, "I'd rather think we're going to die." But I don't know if that's brummy or glum, because there's not much between the two. I'm sorry, my brummy friends. And my nearest city is Wolverhampton, so the Midlands, the West Midlands is my world, and I have a lot of very good friends who speak in that accent. What my friend John Warburton, the comedian, calls the linguistic equivalent of lazy eye, which I always terribly funny. And I say that with affection because I got loads of friends who talk like that. And Andrew Burt has to do a lot of, I seem to recall, being slightly pushed and then having to act like he's been really hurt. And they're very eloquent in the documentary about, because I hadn't realised that the costume designer Dee Robson had not been a favourite of John Nathan Turner. Reading between the lines of the memo he sent, it's a personality clash. But there were problems with this veneer armour, especially when the guy that made it was told late in the day, oh, they have to fight in it as well. So and the poor old sound designer talks about the fact that there's it does clatter somewhat. I actually think it's a nice design because they're slightly skeletal, but it is reminiscent of sort of brass etchings, those sort of knights. In brass etchings, and the colour helps with that as well. He is like a sexy sad vampire, is Martin Potter. He's interviewed on the documentary, and he says one thing. You have to do a particular sort of acting to play these sorts of characters, and I quite like the idea. He invests that with. He quite enjoys the fact that Valgard hates him. And that's quite an interesting dynamic. That all of the Veneer are, they're just staying alive, but it's not much of a life. They are a bit like vampires in a way. They feed off this particular substance, and to keep themselves alive just for the sake of being alive, but they don't seem to enjoy life very much. The radiation's too strong for them. And it's Nissa's final story, of course, as well, which I suppose we've been building up to with her doing her experiment at the top. Yes, I don't quite recognise your voice, but they obviously don't talk to each other that much. I was thinking about this android, the robot, the medical robot. I know what they're going for here, because there's a medical robot in Star Wars that has sort of spindly arms and lots of different attachments. So, oh yes, he noticed that he was. So I've done the story a disservice there. He noticed that it was an intruder. Good. Okay. Well done. Now that's the sort of thing I would have been annoyed that somebody at home did, where they go, and you go, well, if you'd stop talking, you'd actually realise that he has noticed that. But I have to talk during this, otherwise you'll just be listening to the episode. But yes, the medical robot, when you can do it on film and have proper little pistons and gears, those spindly arms and the different attachments can seem like a very efficient sort of medical robot, like the one in The Empire Strikes Back. And I had a toy of that, the medical droid. And that's what they're going for. It's just they have to make it on a BBC budget, and so it probably needs bigger mechanisms that are cheaper than, slender ones and all sorts of. And it's not shot on film, and cardboard painted silver on film. That's not what they would have had in Empire Strikes Back, but it would still look better than on videotape. So here's what's Olvia come to do. Is he? Oh yes. So right, I'm going. Doesn't he say that? Yeah. Now, Jarvik is what Andrew Burt is called in The Harvest of Kairos. Sexy garage mechanic Jarvik. And this is quite funny because they talk in the documentary of they've got these veneer masks which are excellent. They're a great design. Again, very sort of medieval knight looking, but in order to be heard through them, they have to lift the visors up because otherwise they'd sound really muffled. Which sort of defeats the other. It's a bit like in these COVID times, people who have masks on and wear them around their chin or above their eyes. So they're in this plague hole. They've got this protective armor, but every time they speak to each other or have to see the plague carriers they're herding about, they have to lift their protective helmet up. So poor old Turlo and Tegan. I'm surprised because I thought Turlo and Tegan spent all of episodes 2 and 3 in the in the ducts and on film, shot by Remiad Farazin. Yes, who he shot all sorts of things, hasn't he? Elizabeth, didn't he do that? And Johnny English. Didn't he shoot Band of Brothers? I mean, he's an excellent film cameraman. But I thought they spent all their time in the ducts, but no, they spent getting a bit sort of bored. But actually, they send some of it bored sitting on steps as well. So I did the story a disservice when I said it's lots of people walking up and down steps. Sometimes people sit on them too. Oh yes, the story comes alive every time Peter Benson wanders in. I seem to recall because he's only done the one bit in episode 2, but I seem to remember enjoying it. It's a nice makeup too, the burning on his face. He has a sort of old-fashioned Doctor Who-like quality about him. I'm surprised they didn't see him. He's not unlike David Fielder, actually, who they saw for Doctor Number 7. Did I say I had lunch with him at Kensington? I think I did, because he used to hang. I was doing a play, and one of the casts knew Peter Benson, and she said, "Have you been in Doctor Who?" And he said yes, and she said, "Will you have lunch with this young man, because he'd probably love to talk to you." So I had lunch with Peter Benson, and I don't remember much of what he said to me. I know it was a lovely lunch, and he was very chatty and jolly, and I remember we had spaghetti with tomato sauce in the cafe of this open-air theatre, but I don't actually remember the content. So really, he's just a sort of notch on my bedpost, really, rather than somebody whose knowledge and experience benefited me. But I think that happens more and more, and I don't have the excuse that I have with some actors I later got to spend some time with. I had some right old times with Bernard Kay, who unfortunately I remember very little of because he could drink a lot, and and as me too. But although I survived the level of drinking, my memory of the night did not. But I don't have that excuse with Peter Benson. I was young and sober as a judge. But he used to, I know he was mates with that you'd want a seat at that table, because I think there's a group of them that used to all sort of meet up in Kensington, and it's Peter Benson, John Gorrie, the director of the Keys of Marinus, Vernon Dobchev, the scientist, the scientist from the War Games, and also the patron saint of the acting profession, and a wonderful, wonderful man. Damon from Arc of Infinity. Paul Greenhalgh, who was the second Guardian in the Ark. Is that? But so I think there was that. I think they were all a bunch who'd all meet up and chat. You'd want to be a fly on that wall, wouldn't you? And of course, he became famous for being in Heartbeat later. But I love the sort of slightly quizzical, sort of forlorn thing that he's got going on, and that little sort of pause that he gives it to show that he's slightly off kilter. I love his every intonation. It's very fresh, and he's not sending. Although he's undercutting the drama when he's talking about the engines exploding. He's not giving it the sort of welly that you need if you were doing the sort of dramatic thing with it. But he's not undermining it at all. He's taking it very, very seriously. He's just a very offbeat sort of performer who brings that slightly credulous, wonderful, benign energy to it. It's so lovely. And I'd sort of like that we get fed little bits about these people, but there's some nice aerial shots here too. It's so hard doing a fight in the studio, though. I mean, they do their best. John Waller was a very good fight director. But yes, look, this is Andrew Burt has to do a lot of selling this. And I do feel sorry for Boar's Wall. But Andrew Burt has to do that thing there where your arms get pushed up slightly, and that means you're really badly injured. I'm not sure I've ever been injured by that, and I'm sure it's not the only time. I thought, well, he had the thing in episode 2, didn't he, where Nissa sort of shoved him with the flat of her hand, and he had to sort of fall backwards and really sort of sell it. And I feel a bit sorry for him because Andrew Burt was a very good actor, and he has to do lots of overreacting to not too much external stimulus. Oh, he's going to get beaten up by Dominic Guard later as well, isn't he? So the Garm's coming. I quite like the Garm. He's an unfortunate shape, but I think he's got a very sweet face. And it's nice to have a benign monster, as it were. But it's great watching. It's great hearing Stephen Gallagher in the documentary going, I thought it would be this sort of shape in the darkness with sort of glowing eyes, and that was it. I didn't know it would be what it is, which is a man who is both large in height and girth. But I do like his face. I do like the Garm's face. It's just the eyes that actually stop it being real in trying to give it some illumination. But I like he's got a slightly sort of benign thing going on as well. The way he just sort of looks rather sweetly and then carries on. Does Lisa Goddard actually do anything from now on apart from ask the Doctor questions? Because I know they rather optimistically offered the part to Twiggy, but because she starts off as this sort of space piratey thing, but I think she's just there. I'm not sure I'm going to be interested to see if she has any lines that are actually lines that aren't just sort of what's happening and what are you doing now. Because I'm not sure I remember her doing an awful lot. And poor old Dominic Guard just has to follow Nissa about like a sad teenager who's slightly upset his plague-ridden girlfriend's not keeps getting on the bus. Why did Turlough step on every step then? It's quite a small. The step acting on this. I mean, there's all sorts. There's sitting on the steps. There's walking slowly down the steps. There, Turlough could have, if he was in a real hurry, have leapt up 2 or 3 steps at a time. But no, he made sure every step got then. I also think it's very brave putting a character called Boar in this story. Yeah, the pilot of Terminus. Oh yes, there's a sort of skeletal chap, isn't there? But that is great. That is a great burn makeup. And it's. Oh, that's not really. Oh, that's a good line. That's an excellent line. and yes, and they can't waste the hydromel on somebody who might be dead. Oh, there's a nice shadow there on the very grey wall. And I was very excited to hear the Black Guardian. I mean, he does have a magnificent voice. And of course, he's the voice of Deep Thought in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and we had the record of that. So, having Deep Thought in the fact that he was Deep Thought and he was the Black Guardian, and it is an amazing voice. I mean, honey steeped in treacle, steeped in gravel, and marinated in pipe tobacco, and honed on the British stage. I love it because he's Burgundy, isn't he? In Olivier's Henry V, so a real old stager. So the Black Guardian has spoken in riddles to Turlough. I assume that's to prove to himself, the Black Guardian, that Turlough is actually worth having employed, so that he doesn't have to tell him what to do. But he does seem to spend a lot of his time going, "I'll give you one more chance," and Turlough goes, "Oh, please, I promise I'll do it next time." And of course, because Turlough wants to kill the Doctor, the only way to have him not kill the Doctor is either keep trying to kill the Doctor and fail, or be separated from the Doctor. So they have to keep them apart, and that's reasonable. And the characters all splitting up is part and parcel of what we do with Doctor Who. So she said, so that's what you're getting at. Yeah, she's not being given an awful lot of meaty stuff, is she, poor Elisa Goddard? I like the image of the dead astronaut, the dead pilot, and this is where the story, takes an interesting turn. This element of the story sort of comes out of nowhere. The engines are broken, but suddenly we're going, oh yeah, we're gonna talk about the Big Bang. She got to say the Big Bang. And this is a nice idea of going, so something we think of as an entirely natural thing is, why? Well, Doctor Who's responsible for the Great Fire of London. Why can't it be responsible for a slightly bigger and more important fire? But I'm not sure. Am I being thick? I think I've got the thing about how Terminus works out. Excuse, but if he time jumped it forward, having dumped the fuel, does that mean he travelled backward to dump the fuel? I'm not entirely sure where Terminus comes from and where its time is. Is that me being thick? Because it's obviously from a time when they've got this company and the veneer and all that sort of thing. So it doesn't just willy-nilly travel in time, but it can if it needs to. And you sort of think, well, if you can travel in time, do you really need to be a not very good hospital run by slaves? Couldn't you do all sorts of things? Anyway, I don't know. Perhaps I'm being thick. What's happening? Oh, poor old Lisa Goddard is she's not getting the meatiest stuff, is she? But I like the lights going on and off and flashing. So the story is now the jeopardy's really been heightened. And I like the little bits of dust on the switch. So I think that was a really good episode. I think that was very exciting. I love Bohr. I love the fact that the story has taken this really strange left turn and gone, oh yeah, it's not just about this dodgy plague ship. It's about a series of events that started and could end the universe, which as I say, you're not really expecting, and it started to move a bit. So I have to choose a favourite thing, and I have to go back to school. So that was it. That was all my Doctor Who for that year. Oh. So I think I got a good episode. That's certainly the best episode of Terminus so far. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was quite a ride. So I think that's going to go to the menu. So I have to choose a thing. And I think I'm going to play tactically, because I think there's no way you cannot choose Peter Benson as Bohr. And if I don't choose him now, Laurence Clark, my guest, comedian Laurence Clark, might. And if he chooses him next time, well, that's okay, because I get the point next time. Whereas if he chooses him this time and I don't get the point. So I am going to choose Peter Benson's Bohr. I think he's a lovely character. I think he's even more lovely because of the casting, which on its own is very, very good. But then, you know, he does what you would hope an idiosyncratic actor like Peter Benson would do. And I think he's pitch perfect and really watchable. And you like it every time he turns up. So I'm choosing Peter Benson as Bohr as my thing for part 3.
Part 3, I think the highlight for me is the fake human figure, which Olivia makes out of the old cloaks. Again, for no apparent reason. I don't know why he wants to fool people into thinking that he's still standing there. I look absolutely nothing like a person, but it still feels cigarette. I also love Peter Benson and this whole thing is Bohr, because there just aren't enough Scousers in Doctor Who. And I think amongst a cast of, let's face it, some quite bland characters, he really stands out. So yeah, I love Bohr.
So Laurence chose 2 things there, but I think one of them he was being cheeky about, which I didn't even talk about, which was the fake mannequin set up by Olivia to just slightly annoy anybody who was partially sighted and had, you know, and didn't bother to check that thing that doesn't look like a person isn't a person. It's a funny old beat in the story. But yes, he chose Peter Bohr. Hey, Peter Benson. He chose Peter Benson. So that's a point for me, which means that if I get both of Laurence's next 2 things, and I'm sort of kicking myself because I should have gone for the skirt in part 2 rather than Olvia's boots. But then I'm not sure how I would have felt about choosing the skirt in part 2. But it is probably the most memorable moment of the episode. Anyway, done now. Can't do anything about it. So that is part 3, which is a victory for me. Appropriate that the episode that I was allowed to watch all those years ago is the one that came through for me again. And it is, in fact, coming through for me in the story, because I think the story's really picked up and there's quite a lot going on. And, you know, the stakes are really high now. So let's see what happens in part 4, where if we're not careful, it's the end of the world, boys. And so, welcome to part 4 of Terminus. My thanks to Laurence Clark, the comedian, writer. He's a great campaigner for disability representation in the arts. I've known him for a long time, since before I got with my partner, who is also a big campaigner for disability representation in the arts. So let's have a nod for that while we're here. Still a lot of work to do. But let's go to see if there is a cure for Terminus. And we're on part 4. And I'm on the episode selection menu, and I'm going to press enter in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. So poor old Terminus. And of course, I've tried to accentuate the positive, but and it's one of those stories that is bursting with ideas, and actually there's potential in all of the characters as well. But I think it clearly was really scuppered by. I mean, I think they lost they had to do a remount day, so they lost a lot of time, and that's hard. These things are shot so blooming quickly anyway. I mean, considering the things that they had to do, this really that's a great pacey start with the explosion and the flashing lights and the judder. I think it perhaps needed a bit more judder in the earlier episodes, to give a sense that this was a spaceship that was alive and that was failing and the bits were, going wrong elsewhere. I think it could have been done with a bit of that as people were walking up and down the stairs. I texted a friend of mine the other day and said, I'm watching Terminus. It just seems to be a lot of glum people walking up and down stairs. He said you should do a series of one-line story descriptions like that. I like the inexorable of the switch. It's a very Doctor Who thing, that, isn't it? To accuse people of being spies. It's a very stagey fight. But that's good. I like that. Oh, and I like the way that Dominic Guard leaps before thwacking him on the back. That's a nice bit of fighting, and that's a lovely high shot. Except, unfortunately, Paul Dominic Guard has to do what you would do on stage, which is look at Andrew Burt until he clocks in the back of his skull that the Garm's out of the way, then turn to see where Nyssa was and go, oh no, Nyssa, without then looking to see where she might have gone. And he's not helped by actually the attractive camera angle that is shot with, that sort of slightly high. That's a nice high angled shot, but unfortunately it then exposes that he just needs to turn his head to the left to rather than stare at where Nyssa was, because the last thing you do when looking for somebody is look at the one place that they're not. But there we go. So that I think is an example of a production that's having to be captured at a bit of a lick, and I feel sorry for Mary Ridge that this was her only Doctor Who. Yeah, and I think, because of course nowadays you'd be able to sort of have some shimmer around those engines to give a real sense of the radiation crackling around it. And I like all of this, isn't he? He says, were you with Colonel Pereira, the chief? Yay, Colonel Pereira. Oh, God, one of the great unseen Doctor Who characters. So I like all this sort of feeding of the backstory in. I could do with more of a sense. I like it when you get just little crumbs of a life outside or before the show. Oh, and this is the explanation. We're slaves and we depend on Hydromel, which I think is a cracking idea. The idea that they're doing a dirty job, and the reason that they therefore don't do it very well, or particularly caringly, is that they themselves are diseased in a way. They are addicted to a substance. So basically they're drug addicts, and I think that's an intelligent and a winning concept. I like that, a bit more of that. We could have maybe done with a bit, because this is the first time we've found this out. So we've been with the Vanir for a couple of episodes, not quite knowing explicitly. I mean, they've told us that they need the Hydromel, but that's the first time we've had it sort of explicitly stated what it is. And he's just pretending, isn't he? I see. Oh, because he's got his stick. So very good, sneaky. He will be able to get the gun because he's got his because he's got his stick. I like that. I don't know how radiation works, though, because doesn't that mean the gun will be covered in radiation? But he could, I don't know. Oh, yes. And he holds the gun like an expert. And that's quite a nice dynamic, that in this little civilization, or this office environment that they have, having a gun suddenly gives him power, suddenly gives him one-upmanship over Iraq. So we're back in the beautifully shot. We're back in the beautifully shot ventilation corridors, which thoughtfully have the tannoy system in them as well, or it's just very loud and you can hear it wherever you are on the ship. But look how great film is. Just the grill, just the shadows of the grill make it look really fabulous. And the quality of film is so beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, stairs again. Come on, run. Come on, this is dramatic. Sorry, I got annoyed then, but that's the problem, because the stairs have got sort of griddles on them. She's got high heels on. It's all that sort of staging. It's the physical staging that's really hard when you're doing multi-camera, because you can't lop off any maneuvers to tighten them up in a way that you would on film. And I'm not undermining how hard it is. Again, I'm a bit thick. I don't understand why the doors appear. Should I know why the doors appear? I normally think I'm pretty good on what Doctor Who stories are about, and I've seen them a lot, but there are bits of this I'm not quite sure I understand. And that's the. So yeah, the skull means that they can go on to the TARDIS. That thumping of the console isn't what aborted the. It's difficult because I'm talking through this. Stephen Shapansky said I should watch. These with the subtitles on, because then I would be able to give a better account. Oh, poor old Nyssa. It's very brave, actually, to give her the disease. And actually, because I keep forgetting this is her last story, and they set her up as this sort of scientist, don't they? And it's I think it's a much more interesting choice than just have a sort of marry somebody off. But well, we'll see what happens when we get to it. I like this. I buy the switch. I think the switch is nice and strong. That the bending of the metal bar works. And this is where the Garm comes into it, which is very nice. Elisa, I don't think any of Elisa Goddard's lines are more than 2 sentences, so good for her for doing it. It's not quite the deal, Turlough, although Mark Strickson is giving it admirable zeal. What's he going to... Oh, yeah, this is where you think he's killed Turlough. And then at the end, he's fine, I seem to recall. And it's just, that was your final warning. I'll kill him next time, I promise. I know, but we'll have this conversation a fair bit. Perfectly. No, not a clue. Something like some will die and most survive. But can you understand me? I think the boot is on the other foot. Follow me. Okay, but I certainly didn't understand his really important line. But I do think the Garm is very sweet. Oh, yay, Boar. Yes, because it's interesting, because we sort of have to take Boar's word for this. So we first see him sort of going, the reading is still climbing, and he sort of wanders into the Forbidden Zone. So it's interesting that we don't see him find the information in the computer And when there's quite a lot of stuff that goes on, but Stephen Gallagher said a really good thing in the documentary where he said, "Is it the writer's job to make it easy, or is it the writer's job to put the story down and for everybody who's making it to rise to the challenge?" And I think he is a really, really good writer, and I think his instincts are correct, in that you don't pander to write the easy option, because then you're always going to get something quite pedestrian. Whereas he's gone, he goes for the harder option, and that when it pays off, like it certainly does in spades in Warrior's Gate, you get something amazing. And when it doesn't quite pay off in this, I think that the writing is still intriguing and the setup is still intriguing. It's just that the action is, can you imagine this in sort of, dark, gloomy corridors and dripping and rusty and, shuddering ship and bits of steel. Imagine it on the set of Alien. I know Doctor Who couldn't do Alien, but I think that's what. And see the guy on there with just the eyes, way. But now you can see him. He's a walking dog. Oh, but I like him. And credit to Davison. And I like the fact that the Garm is so don't and just goes, no, you don't have to lie to me. And it's quite shaming of the Doctor there, really, because you don't have to force me or lie to me to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. But Davison is strangely underused in this. He hasn't. Nobody's quite had enough to do. It's interesting. Is it interesting? No, I say it's interesting when I don't have anything to say. That is a tick of mine, and I shall be honest about it. Yeah, so I was a bit in episode 2 when I sort of said, it's a flawed system having this cure that doesn't work. The cure doesn't work. I don't know who this guy is that they're holding. I've got to show you my face in order to talk. Right, so they're assuming this guy we've never seen before took the signal box. But I don't know. I don't know what that is. But yes, I was the idea that this is a perfectly good system if only it was done properly. Is absolutely perfectly right and plausible. It's a system that through sort of mismanagement and unkindness, it's an unkind world, the world of Terminus, through and because of the slavery element, because the Garm is a slave, because the Vanir are slaves, nobody really gets the best out of anybody, and the end result is muddled. Whereas if they do it properly and just a bit of admin is all you need, just a bit of administrative competence, and treat your workers well, and your old cure box will be much more efficient. We've finally got some camera shake, which is nice, and the lights are down, which is nice. And I like the Garm getting his sort of his moment in the sun. I'm still waiting for Lisa Goddard to get. She hasn't really got a story arc, has she, Lisa Goddard? It's Lisa Goddard. I know. Who was, of course, married to Colin Baker and Alvin Stardust. It's working. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just trying to imagine the part on paper because I think she's good, but it's only because I've had to sort of think about it. I think she doesn't really have a sort of through story. At least Dominic Guard's got his sister. Didn't his sister have the Lazar disease? And I like this. I think this is sweet that the Doctor is nice to the Garm, and the Garm asks for his freedom, Set me free. Oh, I like that. And that the monster isn't a monster. And I know Stephen Gallagher wanted him to be the sort of the dog at the gates of hell. That's a quite a Norse. It's a recurring piece of imagery throughout various mythologies. But of course, the Vanir come from Norse mythology as well. Rest. That's a very Fifth Doctor word to say to a creature. Rest. Ah. And I like and I think there's a cut back here, isn't there? Yeah, there's the broken box. Then, yeah, and then he does a little look. I mean, he's got no facial expression at all, but the camera angle and the little bit of the movement, I think all that worked. Now they just look like they're sort of backstage somewhere, like they're backstage at the Old Vic. A little bit of a sort of walk to camera thing for Andrew Burt there. But yeah, this does really look like they're in the wings. But the lights are nice and down, which is good. This is Terminus. No one's happy here. I mean, yeah, that's the story in a nutshell. He's good at he's free. Oh, I'd forgotten about that. Freeze. Yeah, okay. She doesn't have any great speeches or a character arc, but she does get to point a laser gun and say freeze. That's when you sign on the dotted line. And good old, I think it's a really positive thing that they do with Nyssa. When I mean, it still sort of, I think, comes out of nowhere. But because companions, could be perfectly happy at the end of the story before, and then this is when your contract's up, off you go. Whereas I think stuff gets seeded a bit more now. There's far less character continuity, as it were, over the seasons, and I don't mind that. I don't think one's better or worse, really. I like the fact that Doctor Who is about new worlds. I was hoping for something rather better on the other side. I love that, and actually, I used that in my In Memoriam video. For the year that Peter Benson and Andrew Burt and John Waller all went the same year, which was a couple of years ago, yeah. But yes, I think it's very bold, giving Nyssa this very proactive. She's the one that comes up with the solution for how this should be done, and then she makes the big sacrifice, and. Valgard looked like he was the sort of bad guy, but actually he was he was the one that was sort of bucking the system, and not because he's necessarily been no, he is. I suppose he's sort of nicer than Arak, isn't it? We're supposed to see that as a victory that he's won, but he's he's not he's by no means an angel, and I quite like that it's a sort of rough and ready character that's the sort of the heroic one of the Vanir. They are, they come from quite a grubby and morally compromised place. That these aren't, not everything's pretty. I love how she can tell what it is just by looking at it. It's these drugs you can have, and they will also be the lighting system on the planet Frontios in the future. And that's a nice thought to the outside world, because you think, why wouldn't the company do it? Doesn't he have to do a bit of... I think he has to do... Yes, I think he does a good job with this, because it's hard to do the... Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, it's a kind of... Because he needs to punctuate the scene. It's a shame that he almost walks into the wall as he leaves. But I think he does a decent job of that. It's a slightly phony ask, and I think he does it well. And I really like the way that Dominic Guard does the kind of, no, it's all right, I'll shoot it. And she's like, oh, you big wet lettuce. But I like the way he does it. He's very pretty, isn't he? And I do like his hair and the headband. I like that whole look. And his brother Christopher are voices in the Lord of the Rings animation, the Ralph Bakshi one, aren't they? And I think they were also... Were they both in A Woman of Substance? With Jenny Seagrove and Liam Neeson. Oh, Christopher Guard definitely was. And Martin Potter was married to Susie Blake. According to IMDb, he is still married to Susie Blake of Victoria Wood, as seen on TV fame. And they haven't been married for a long time. Just goes to show you shouldn't always believe most of what you read on IMDb. It is just updated by people. And actually, even if you know what you're talking about, you try to change it. They sometimes don't let you. But Susie Blake has not been married to Martin Potter for a very long time. She is actually now married to the son of the actor Victor Platt, who played a policeman in Quatermass in the Pit. I'm about to. Is that about the longest line she's had all episode? I'm about to. But she invests it with a nice little energy. They have, of course. Has Tegan been partying? 'Cause she suddenly got... I love that bit. That's brilliant. I love that. There needs more of that. That say you're pleased to see her is absolutely fantastic. I wish Nyssa and the Doctor had more moments like that. You can see what Peter Davison means when he says he wished he'd had sort of more to do with Nyssa, because that Doctor telling you're pleased to see her is terrific. I think that might be my favourite bit. And I like the philosophy behind this, you know. Yeah, don't. He was doing it before because you told him he had to, and because he had a box. Now just ask him nicely. He's a good dog. And I sort of feel the same about Terminus. As I've really wanted to champion this because I like the underdog or the undergarm. But this is really nice. I mean, it's appropriate. It takes place at the bottom of some stairs with everyone being glum. They could have done a lot of symbolism where people were happy when they're at the top of the stairs and sad at the bottom of them. This is excellent. The reprise of Nyssa's theme from Keeper of Traken, which is a beautiful piece of music. And I like the way the Doctor goes to shake her hand and she gives him a kiss. There's real emotion there from Sarah Sutton. And you know, they're not afraid of saying, but this is going to be really hard. And do you want some clothes? And yeah, Davison selling it all there. You would hope that's not the goodbye. You would hope they come to the TARDIS and she packs a bag and it's a very Doctor Who thing. Is I'm leaving, so I'm going to say goodbye in the set I'm standing in, and we'll just go our separate ways now. But I think it ends here, doesn't it, with the Black Guardian shouting at Turlough. So I like to think that's not the last that Nyssa and the Doctor see of each other, and she comes and pats a bag and goes, yeah, I'll stay on Terminus in more than my underwear. There's a skirt lying around, so you can have that as well. And Olvie will go, yeah, and I bundled up a cloak to make it look like a man. You could use that too. And I love this because we've seen the Black Guardian only on the TARDIS scanner. I like the fact he's suddenly in clear, you know, and you know, it goes really close. You can make out the hair sticking out of his nose. But I like that because he's such a striking image, and he's, you know, not many actors I think can get away with looking right down at the camera. And he does it. He's got such a demonic aspect. I think that's and it's quite shocking because he's been slightly sort of ephemeral on the scanner, to suddenly have him, you know, crystal clear and, you know, as close as you can go. That's a great way to end the story. So I'm sorry if I was a bit thick and didn't pick up all of what or didn't quite follow everything of the story, which I hope is unusual for me. And I'm sorry if I was perhaps a bit top heavy with the criticism early on, but I'd really expected to struggle with episode 1 because I'd remembered the first time that I'd struggled. Not the first time, the time I watched it in the week of Rose. And I did it for Running Through Corridors as well. I'd forgotten about that. But you will have to read about that when the book comes out, which will be in about forever. And I remember just not having an awful lot to say about it. So I hope I had some interesting things to say about it, even if it was only the fact that Martin Potter isn't married to Susie Blake anymore, so that you can update your social diaries. I've got to choose two things. Well, Nissa's leaving scene, obviously. And I suppose that includes Dr. Teller, you're pleased to see her, which I think is terrific. And I suppose the idea of the slavery of the Vanir, which I think is an interesting dynamic. When Doctor Who stories often follow a very similar template, I think having something like that in it that comes from slightly left field and is unique to this story, or particular to this story, and it does help the plot a little bit. It helps. It's a little bit of the world building. And Doctor Who's interesting if it's taking you to to different places and introducing you to different structures and civilizations and that sort of thing. I think it's that. I'd like to say the Garm, but I know I'm being overly kind when I'm being nice about the Garm. I just think he's quite sweet. I know if I showed that to any of my friends, they'd laugh me out of the room. So I have to be careful. And I suppose I like, I don't really know enough about it, but I like the fact that Stephen Gallagher, brings in elements of Norse mythology, and he's ambitious. He wants to grapple with big concepts and big ideas and shovel them into Doctor Who, and I enjoy that ambition. I like his writing, and I like his appreciation of what the possibilities of Doctor Who can be. And if you ever get the opportunity to hear an interview with him, I haven't listened to it this time round, but I remember on the commentary for this, him really sort of pitching in and almost acting like a moderator and keeping things going and bringing perspectives. He's obviously done a bit of his homework, not just about his stuff. He doesn't just talk about himself. He's found out a bit about the actors and all sorts of other stuff. And that's a sign of him, really. I think I've only met him the once. But I really enjoyed his company, and he came over to meet me here in Manchester, which was very nice of him. And he's a really warm and engaged and enthused guy, and he likes Quatermass. So do I say Stephen Gallagher is my thing? But I don't know if that's cheating. And I don't know if... Yeah, no, damn it, it's my podcast. I'm going to say Sarah Sutton, Nissa's leaving scene, which includes the... you can tell Dr. Please just here. And also, because I was talking about Janet Fielding in that last scene, I don't know if she's not been to a disco the night before, because she has. I've been out till 3 o'clock in the morning, and I've thrown all of this on and got to the studio throat. She sounds like she's been on a bit of a rave, had a few fags outside a nightclub at 3 a.m. and perhaps had a glass of wine before bedtime. Because Doctor, she's very throaty in in those final moments of part 4. So Nissa's leaving scene, and I'm going to say Stephen Gallagher. I like what he brings to Doctor Who. I'd have liked to have seen him do more Doctor Who. I like the fact that he still engages with Doctor Who. I just like Stephen Gallagher. And so bringing the Norse mythology and bringing, trying to create some sort of interesting system with the Vanir. Those are going to be my two things. I don't think Laurence is going to choose that. I think I might have thrown away what little advantage I bought myself in episode 3. But it's nice to acknowledge people you like sometimes. So I'm going to do that. I was never going to win with Terminus anyway, was I?
Part 4. I guess what I love about part 4 is that it's one of the few times in the classic series where a companion feels like they're given a proper send-off. The whole story is around Nissa's departure, right from when she's synthesizing her enzyme, right at the start, which is a clue to what she's going to be doing after Doctor Who. So, yeah, quite unusual for the classic series. She doesn't just decide to go at the end, but there's a proper send-off. And then, finally, my 5th overall thing to love about Terminus, and I'm going to cheat because it's the DVD cover. And what I love about the DVD cover is the fact that they've superimposed the skull motif over Nissa, so that when I look at it, it looks like she's wearing a large black bra with white furry trim. Although that could be just me as well. So I've been Laurence.
Oh, Laurence, you cheat. I've got the DVD here somewhere. I'm going to look at that cover. Well, I was never going to have that, so I'm glad I went for Stephen Gallagher, just to tip a hat to somebody I admire and like. I'm glad you like the DVD. There are some beautiful DVD covers on the range. I think it's one of the things, as a Doctor Who fan, actually, I think that some of the VHS covers are absolutely stunning as well. I think it's one of the things. Some of the alternate ones you find online as well. Some of the fan artwork and covers that people have done. Doctor Who is such an inspirer of creativity. But the ones we get for the range have been, and the new Blu-ray box sets. Oh my goodness! So there are such clever people in fandom, all of whom, would probably acknowledge they've been inspired in the things that they do now by Doctor Who. And yes, there's the artwork, the layout, and all this. There's not many people who work on various bits of the Doctor Who range who didn't get drawn there because they were fans, which is an extraordinary thing. I don't think you get that with many other commercial releases of stuff where the people in charge of the a particular element of it and necessarily dyed in the wool fans of something. So Doctor Who has been very much fueled. Well, no, we just benefit. Doctor Who would still be good without fans, but I think I certainly as a consumer get very excited by the fact that the DVD cover, the trailer, the coming next trailer on the DVDs and all that sort of thing are done by fans who are also professionals in what they do, and produce something that you talk about. You go, have you seen the cover of that? Have you seen the next time trailer on that? So that every little piece of a Doctor Who release is a sort of talking point, which is great because I love talking about Doctor Who, as you can probably tell. Laurence, do follow him on Twitter and do follow his Facebook page. He is an excellent live comedian, but he's also done some really thoughtful and funny short films and sketches. And his stand-up, he does refer to Doctor Who. I'm not entirely over the moon about comedians talking about Doctor Who in their sets, because that's my turf, biatches. Anybody who just takes what I said seriously you don't come to any comedian shows ever. But it is my turf. Even he's a good comic in his own right, but the fact that he also throws in Doctor Who references sometimes means there's an added bonus for the likes of you and me. And he's a trailblazer. But there are more disabled comics emerging on the circuit now, which is a good thing. But Laurence has been doing it for a very, very long time, and with great skill too. and I think has been somewhat overlooked. And which gives the lie to, oh God, in diversity they just give gigs to any old person just for the sake of diversity. Well, I think Laurence deserves to have had his place in the sun, irrespective of the fact that he's a disabled comedian, just because he's a really good comedian. So I would check out his stuff. I think you will very much enjoy it. And I know that Laurence has got some good gigs coming up and is making waves in various different media. So I know that we will be seeing more of him, and rightly so. So I hope we managed to get through. I thought Terminus would be a bumpy ride. In fact, if anything, it needed more bumps. I think its big problem, which I hadn't until I had to sort of talk about it here. And I know I'm supposed to be accentuating the positive, but I think what is responsible for a lot of its bad reputation is that it's very static and very glum. And I think if it had got a little bit more pace and a little bit more sense of this, spaceship that was malfunctioning and shuddering and it's not its fault. It's set in a floodlit studio in on BBC sets. That's Doctor Who. That's Doctor Who anyway. But I think it just needed a bit of pace and a bit of energy. Needed Graham Harper there on the floor going, come on everybody, give it a bit of welly. But I feel sorry for Mary Ridge because it was made under hugely compromised circumstances. And I still think it's interesting. I still think it's beguiling. I still think there's a world there that I don't quite understand. So that's nice because every time I think I watch it, I'll still be searching for things, but not to the extent that I can't follow the story or I'm baffled by it, but it's still slightly nebulous, which is interesting, and there's plenty to recommend in it. But for now, it's Boar did say I was hoping for something rather better on the other side, which everybody turns over to ITV and goes, there is something better on the other side, but not at all. Oh, well, look, thanks for listening. I hope you're all well. I'm getting as throaty as Janet Fielding in the final scenes now. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to destroy the box and set you free until the next time I take you, I hope, to a slightly happier time and place than the grey environs of Terminus. Until then, goodbye.
I've been Laurence Clark. You can find me on Twitter at Laurence_Clark or on Facebook at Laurence Clark Comedian, or my website laurenceclark.co.uk. Thanks.
Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydoke, and my special guest this time around is Laurence Clark, who can be found on Twitter at Laurence with a U _Clark without an E. And at the time of recording these credits for this omnibus version, Laurence's comedy pilot Perfect will be premiering on the Dave TV channel on August the 26th, 2022, but thereafter it will be available on the UK TV Play app. So check that out. He recorded that, of course, after he did Happy Times and Places, and I like to think as a result of being on it. Congratulations, Laurence. He's a good guy. Thoroughly deserves it. I'm grateful to him and, of course, to the many patrons who make this podcast possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Christopher Joyce, Kevin Murdoch, Stephen, Chris Stokes, Michael Herbert, Gary Thomas, and CM. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork Dylan Patterson. And if you would like to be a patron, then you can sign up at patreon.com/Toby Haydoke. Tiers start from as little as £3 per month, and even on that lowest tier, you can get a 10% discount for signing up for a year. And you get pretty much everything available on that lowest tier too, apart from a couple of little trinkets that lure you up the patronage ladder. But the bonus material, the exclusive podcasts, the AMAs, all that sort of thing are available for the minimum fee, which is £3 a month. And there are usually 3 releases per week. There's also the Ko-fi option, which is a one-off payment whenever you like, of whatever denomination you like. They pretend it's cups of coffee. I don't actually drink coffee, so I would probably get other stuff with it, like tea. And that, unfortunately, does not get you any of the bonus material, but it's basically a way of chucking a couple of pennies into my hat as you pass if you're feeling flush on that particular day. It's the busking version of podcasting, and that's fine by me. But look, I know times are tough. I've just looked at how much a train ticket to London is now compared to what it used to be, and you're not guaranteed to actually get a train. So just listening to these is great. But a 5-star review and some ratings on the internet would be great. So yeah, Laurence has got a comedy pilot. Isn't that good news? He's a terrific comic and a proper fan. And actually on the Patreon there's a couple of pictures of a young Laurence on the set of Terminus, on the TARDIS set with Peter Davison, which is a joyous thing to behold. And thanks to Laurence for sharing them with me. It was in those days where you could only, you took photographs and you sent them away and got them back. So I think he's literally got 2. Nowadays, of course, you'd fill your phone with them. Anyway, Laurence has got a comedy pilot, much deserved, and it's called Perfect, and it will hopefully lead to more commissions for this fabulous writer. Good comic too. That's Laurence Clark, so do check him out. And as I say, I like to think it's because he was in happy times and places that good. I mean, I'm talking now as I consider this, 2 of our guests have sadly since passed away since doing it, so actually you're more likely to die than you are to get a television programme. So perhaps I should just shut up now. This is Happy Times and Places, where all the Doctor Who fans come to die.